Pedagogy Indicators by Lucian Green Aigs for Pedagogy Helper 2 of 3. 18. I observed the sea slug. I did this by stating that modernity is like eggs, which are activated by arguments. First, I observed the other. Second, I observed the self. Third, I observed the universe. 19. I observed that an egg containing an infinary number of braceonings was given to the writer, where infinary means an infinite-like number where one can see all numbers. I did this by stating that the pedagogy helper helped eggs to be somewhere. First, I observed the writer. Second, I observed the reader. Third, I observed that everyone was happy. 20. I decided to listen again. I did this by observing that the pedagogy helper helped with the performance aids. First, I found the scripts. Second, I found the actors. Third, I watched the performance. 21. I found that meditation helped meet the professional requirements of meditation teachers, their students who were also pedagogy helpers and pedagogues using Aigs. I did this by observing that the meditation teacher's students who were also pedagogy helpers made Aigs available. First, the teacher made the claim available. Second, the student researched the claim. Third, the student made it available. 22. The universe sustained the self ate from the cosmos, The self determined that pedagogy Aigs helped it. The others endorsed the self. The self endorsed the others. The self assisted them. 23. The self examined that the work was finished on time. The self knew that pedagogy Aigs helpers helped. The self observed the helper help the self. The self saw the second helper help. The second helper also helped the self. 24. The pedagogy helper was in natural law. The pedagogy Aigs helper was legally right. The self examined the waterline at different times. The self was above it at those times. The self offered the egg service. 25. The self read the egg, and then the self delegated distributing the number of eggs. The self found that the pedagogy helper confirmed the number. The self wrote the number. The self wrote what it meant. The self confirmed the number. 26. I endorsed the pedagogy helper Aigs. The other examined the results of the pedagogy helper Aigs. The self examined what the others wanted. The self examined the self and others. The self examined the results of the pedagogy helper Aigs. 27. The self was ready for a new egg. The self decided that the pedagogy helper Aigs was good. The other knew how the self and other wrote down the eggs. The self knew how the eggs worked. The self knew what the other meant. 28. The self observed that the whole body was in comfort when using Aigs. The self observed that being an Aig pedagogy helper required medicine. The self observed that there was no mental illness when using Aigs, there was good mental health when using Aigs. The self observed that there were no headaches when using Aigs, there was head comfort when using Aigs. The self observed that there were no muscle aches and pains when using Aigs, there was muscular comfort when using Aigs. 29. The self examined pedagogy and found that it worked. The self observed that being an Aig pedagogy helper required pedagogy. The self became a pedagogue. The self became a recordings producer. The self became a pedagogy helper. 30. The self observed that Aigs worked for the other. The self observed that being an Aig pedagogy helper required meditation. The self observed that meditation prevented cancer, maintained health. The self observed that meditation produced better results in education and business institutions. The self observed that meditation decreased stress, maintained relaxation. 31. The Parliament knew about how the self and other knew the way. The Parliamentary pedagogy helper chose the direction with the Aig. The Parliament made the correct decision by law. The Parliament chose the direction with fine art. The Parliament chose the direction with philosophy. 32. The self knew what the other desired. The helper's pedagogy aig is. The self knew it. The self knew the other. The other knew the self. 33. The self knew the other. The self attained or discouraged the aig because it was right or wrong, respectively. The self knew what the aig was. The self knew what it did. The self knew that I was right about it. 34. The self attained a simulated and intelligent thing. The audience member accessed help pedagogy aids with 50 recorded or braceonings. The pedagogy helper gave the braceoning to the writer. The writer wrote it down. The audience reacted to the braceoning.